First Contact, and the Vashkari Protocol. The Vashkari were legends long before humanity left their solar system. For 20,000 years, they had carved a violent path through the stars, leaving extinction and ruin in their wake. Their biology made them perfect killers. 8 limbs of corded muscle, chitinous armor that could deflect energy weapons, and multiple redundant organs that made them nearly impossible to kill. But it wasn't their physical characteristics that made other species tremble at their name. It was their psychology. The Vashkari viewed the universe through the lens of predator and prey. There was no diplomacy, no negotiation, no concept of mutual benefit. You were either strong enough to survive an encounter with them, or you were consumed. Their massive bioships, living vessels grown from the genetic material of conquered species, darkened the skies of countless worlds throughout 3 galaxies. The Andromeda Compact, the Milky Way Coalition, and the Triangulum Confederacy all had dedicated defense protocols for Vashkari encounters. Immediate retreat, no communication, and if cornered, unconditional surrender. Surrender meant slavery. Resistance meant annihilation. These were the only outcomes other species had experienced in 20 millennia of Vashkari dominance. Until they met humans. The UES Horizon was a Class 3 mining vessel with a crew of 42, harvesting helium-3 from the atmosphere of a gas giant in the Epsilon Eridani system. It was humanity's farthest permanent outpost, established just 70 years after the development of FTL travel. Captain Alina Reyes had been running this route for 15 years without incident. The most excitement she'd encountered was the occasional solar flare or unexpectedly dense pocket of atmospheric turbulence. That changed on a Tuesday by Earth's calendar. Captain, unidentified vessel has just dropped out of FTL. It's massive. Lieutenant Johansson's voice cracked over the intercom. Reyes was in the middle of her lunch break, a protein pack, and synthesized coffee that never quite tasted right. She put down her fork and switched the mess hall display to the main sensor feed. Her blood ran cold. The vessel approaching them was unlike anything in human records. Nearly 3 kilometers in length, its surface rippled and pulsed like the skin of some enormous deep-sea creature. Bioluminescent patterns cascaded across its hull, mesmerizing and disturbing in equal measure. "All hands to stations," Reyes said, keeping her voice deliberately level. "Full defensive posture, but weapons cold. I'm on my way to the bridge." By the time she arrived, the alien vessel had moved to within 10,000 kilometers, practically point-blank range in space terms. The bridge crew sat rigid at their stations, each face pale with tension. "Any communications?" Reyes asked as she took her seat. "Nothing, Captain, but we're picking up energy readings consistent with weapons charging," replied Tactical Officer Park. The Horizon was no warship. Its defensive systems were designed to handle pirates and debris, not whatever this was. If the alien vessel decided to attack, they wouldn't stand a chance. "Captain, I'm accessing the xenobiology database," said Science Officer Meta, her fingers flying across her console. "Cross-referencing with the vessel's biological signatures. Oh my God. What is it, Doctor? If these readings are correct, that's a Vashkari ship. But that's impossible. They've never been recorded in our galaxy." The bridge fell silent. All human spacefarers had heard of the Vashkari, even if most considered them to be more myth than reality. Reyes had read the scant intelligence reports, mostly gathered from scattered conversations with the few spacefaring species humans had encountered since venturing to the stars. "Options?" Reyes asked, her mind racing. "Standard protocol among other species is immediate surrender," Meta said, though reports suggest that rarely ends well for the crew. Reyes considered this. Her ship carried 41 other lives, all her responsibility. The logical move would be to follow established protocol and hope for mercy. But something in her rebelled against the idea of simply giving up without trying anything else. "Open a channel," she said suddenly. "Captain." Park looked bewildered. The intelligence reports specifically advise against. That's an order, Lieutenant. Park hesitated only a moment before complying. Channel open. Reyes took a deep breath. This is Captain Elena Reyes of the United Earth Ship Horizon. We are on a peaceful mining mission and mean no harm. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. For long minutes, there was no response. The massive alien vessel continued its approach, now close enough that it filled the main view screen entirely. Its surface continued to pulse with those strange, hypnotic patterns. Then, a sound came through the speakers that made everyone on the bridge flinch. It was a high-pitched chittering, interspersed with deep, resonant rumbles that seemed to vibrate the very deck beneath their feet. Translation Matrix is attempting to process, Communications Officer Chen reported, but it's having difficulty with the syntax structure. Before she could continue, the alien vessel suddenly accelerated, closing the remaining distance between them in seconds. The horizon shuddered as it was caught in some kind of energy field. "We're being pulled in," Park shouted. "Engine control is not responding." Reyes gripped the arms of her chair. "All hands, prepare for boarding. I repeat, prepare for boarding. This is not a drill." As the horizon was drawn inexorably toward the massive bioship, Reyes made a decision that would later be studied in every military academy on Earth and its colonies. "Lieutenant Park, arm all mining charges. Set them to proximity detonation, maximum yield." Park stared at her in disbelief. "Captain, those are planet cracker charges. At this range, we'd be caught in the blast too." "I'm aware of that, Lieutenant. Do it anyway." As Park reluctantly carried out the order, Reyes opened a shipwide channel. "This is your captain speaking. As you know, we have encountered what appears to be a Vashkari vessel and are currently being drawn into what I can only assume is their docking bay or equivalent. Standard protocol would be to surrender and hope for the best." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But I'm not going to do that. Not because I think we can win this fight. We can't. But because I believe that even in the face of certain defeat, how we face that defeat matters. The Vashkari understand strength, so we're going to show them a different kind of strength." The horizon continued its inexorable journey toward the maw of the alien vessel, which had now opened to reveal a cavernous space lined with pulsating organic material. "I've armed our mining charges," Reyes continued. "If they attempt to board us, if they attempt to take any of us prisoner, I will detonate those charges. We will die, yes, but we will take their ship with us. This is not a suicide mission. It's a statement. We are humans. We may be outmatched, but we will not be prey." As the horizon was engulfed by the Vashkari vessel, the crew braced for whatever would come next. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Nothing happened. No boarding parties, no weapon fire, no communication. "What are they waiting for?" Chen whispered, the tension on the bridge palpable. And then, remarkably, the horizon began to move again, but not deeper into the alien vessel. They were being expelled, pushed back out into open space. Once clear of the massive bioship, they found themselves face to face with it once more. This time, however, the communication system crackled to life. The same chittering sounds came through, but now interspersed with crude, broken English. "Humans, not prey, not predator. What are you?" Reyes didn't hesitate. "We are explorers. We seek knowledge, not conquest, but we will defend ourselves and our freedom, even at the cost of our lives." Another long silence followed. Then, "Interesting. You will live today. We will watch, learn." Without further communication, the massive Vashkari vessel turned away from the horizon and accelerated into FTL, disappearing in a flash of distorted space. The bridge erupted in a mixture of cheers and disbelieving laughter. They had survived an encounter with the most feared species in known space, and not through superior firepower or technology, but through a willingness to die rather than be subjugated. "Stand down from alert," Reyes ordered, allowing herself a small smile. "And someone get me a direct line to Earth Command. They're not going to believe this." What they couldn't know was that this encounter, soon to be known throughout human space as the Resolution, would fundamentally change humanity's place in the galactic order. The Vashkari, for the first time in their long history of conquest, had found a species that defied their understanding of the universe. And they were intrigued. The legends and the truth. News of the Resolution spread through human space like wildfire. Captain Alina Reyes became an overnight celebrity. Her decision to arm the mining charges debated endlessly by military strategists and ethicists alike. But while humans celebrated their first encounter with the legendary Vashkari, the ripples of that meeting were causing far greater waves throughout the three galaxies. The Galactic Council, a loose confederation of spacefaring species that had managed to survive in the shadow of Vashkari dominance, called an emergency session. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the ancient meeting halls on neutral Paxtoria to discuss this unprecedented development. "They let them go," said Ambassador Kvex of the Silicon Mines, their crystalline form glittering under the council lights. "In 20,000 years of records, there is not a single instance of the Vashkari releasing potential prey. Perhaps they simply weren't hungry," joked Ambassador Lore, though his 4 eyes didn't show any humor. "This is no laughing matter," countered the Trilixian representative, her translucent membranes fluttering in agitation. "If the Vashkari have found something unique in these humans, it could shift the balance of power throughout all 3 galaxies." "Then we must learn more about these humans," declared High Elder Zix-Ku, the oldest and most respected member of the council. "Send observers. Study them. We must understand what makes them different." Meanwhile, back on Earth, military leadership was grappling with the implications of their narrow escape. Admiral Carey paced the length of the Situation Room, a holographic representation of the Vashkari bioship rotating slowly above the central table. "They could have destroyed us without breaking a sweat," he said. "Why didn't they?" Commander Jackson Thorne, Earth's foremost xenopsychologist, leaned forward. "I believe Captain Reyes inadvertently tapped into something fundamental about the Vashkari psychology. They categorize all other life forms as either predator or prey. Humans did something they couldn't categorize." "Which was?" pressed Curry. "We were willing to die rather than be conquered. Prey runs. Predators fight for dominance. But Captain Reyes and her crew chose a third option, mutual destruction. It confused them. The Admiral considered this. So what do we do now? Hope they stay confused." "No," Thorne replied, his voice firm. "We need to understand them better. And more importantly, we need them to understand us. I'm proposing a diplomatic mission. To the Vashkari." Kari looked at him like he'd suggested they vacation in the center of a supernova. "Are you insane?" "Possibly," Thorne admitted with a slight smile. "But consider this. They're watching us now. They said so themselves. Wouldn't it be better to control the narrative they're forming about humanity rather than leave it to chance?" 3 months later, Commander Thorne found himself aboard the UES Diplomat, a specially designed vessel built for the sole purpose of making contact with the Vashkari. Unlike traditional human ships with their clean lines and utilitarian design, the Diplomat featured exterior modifications based on what little they knew of Vashkari aesthetic preferences, organic curves, bioluminescent patterns, and a hull composition that would register as something unique on their sensors. Locating the Vashkari hadn't been difficult. Contrary to popular belief, they weren't nomadic. They had a homeworld, Vash Prime, located in the outer reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy. What was difficult was convincing the rest of humanity that this mission wasn't suicide. "Entering orbit around Vash Prime," announced the pilot, her voice tight with tension. Through the view screen, Thorne could see a planet unlike any he'd studied before. Its surface seemed to be in constant motion, with vast swathes of what looked like living tissue rather than land masses. Massive structures that might have been cities rose like organic growths, rather than constructed buildings. Any response to our hails? Thorn asked. Nothing yet, sir, but we're being scanned extensively. Thorn nodded. Keep broadcasting our greeting message on all frequencies. The message was simple. We are humans. We come to learn and to teach. We seek understanding, not conflict. For hours, they orbited in silence. Then, without warning, their ship was enveloped in the same type of energy field that had captured the horizon. But instead of being drawn toward a bioship, they were pulled directly toward the planet's surface. Remain calm, Thorn ordered as the planet loomed larger in their view screen. This is why we're here. They landed, or were deposited, in what appeared to be a vast amphitheater. The ground beneath them pulsed rhythmically, and the air, when they tested it, was surprisingly breathable, if heavy with unfamiliar organic compounds. Suits on, but helmets optional, Thorn decided after reviewing the atmospheric data. Let's show them our faces. As the diplomatic team disembarked, they found themselves surrounded by Vashkari. In person, they were even more imposing than the intelligence reports had suggested, standing over 3 meters tall, with their 8 limbs arranged in a configuration that allowed for both quadrupedal and bipedal movement. They looked like a nightmare fusion of arachnid and cephalopod. Their chitinous exoskeletons shifted color as they moved, displaying patterns that Thorn suspected were a form of communication. One Vashkari approached, larger than the others, its exoskeleton adorned with what might have been ceremonial scarification. When it spoke, translation devices struggled to keep up with the complex mixture of sounds. Humans, you return. Willing. Why? Thorn stepped forward. We seek understanding. You spared our ship. We want to know why, and we want to establish peaceful relations. The Vashkari chittered among themselves, their movements agitated. Finally, the leader spoke again. Follow. They were led through structures that defied human architectural understanding. Everything seemed alive, responding to the Vashkari's presence, shifting and reshaping itself as they passed. Eventually, they reached what Thorn could only assume was a seat of power, a vast chamber where hundreds of Vashkari observed from recess-like structures embedded in the walls. The leader took a central position. For 20,000 of your years, we have ruled. All species, predator or prey. Simple, clear, its multifaceted eyes fixed on Thorn. Then, humans, Captain Reyes. Not prey, not predator. Willing to die, to kill us, to kill self. Why? Thorn considered his words carefully. Because humans value freedom above survival. We would rather die as equals than live as slaves. The translation seemed to cause confusion among the Vashkari. They chittered rapidly, colors flashing across their exoskeletons. Freedom, the leader finally said, the word clearly foreign to them. Concept, unclear. And so began the most unusual diplomatic exchange in human history. For days, Thorn and his team attempted to explain human concepts that had no equivalent in Vashkari language or culture. Freedom, cooperation, mutual benefit, self-determination. In return, they learned about the Vashkari. Their society was ruthlessly hierarchical, based entirely on dominance. Their expansion through the galaxies wasn't driven by resources or territory, but by a biological imperative to prove their superiority. They didn't conquer out of hatred or even necessity, but because it was the only way they knew to exist. On the 7th day, the Vashkari leader, whom they now knew was called Supreme Hunter Kivash, made an announcement that would change the course of galactic history. We have decided. Humans, not for hunting, not for enslaving. Humans, for learning. Thorn struggled to understand. Learning? You want to study us? Yes. No. We learn from you. You learn from us. Equal. The word equal sent ripples of agitation through the assembled Vashkari, but none challenged Kivash's declaration. A cultural exchange, Thorn suggested, hardly believing what he was hearing. Yes, exchange and alliance. This was beyond anything Thorn had hoped for. Alliance against whom? Hivash's next words sent a chill down Thorn's spine. The void consumes. Beyond 3 galaxies. Coming. Need. Humans. Need. Freedom. To fight. Later, as the diplomatic team prepared to return to Earth with news of this unprecedented alliance, Thorn gazed out at the strange organic landscape of Vash Prime. The Vashkari, the most feared predators across 3 galaxies, had recognized something in humanity that they needed, not weakness to exploit, but a strength they lacked. The ability to value something beyond survival. The willingness to sacrifice for principles. The capacity to cooperate rather than dominate. And as news of this alliance spread throughout the galaxies, other species began to look at humans differently as well. Not as newcomers to be dismissed or potential conquests to be evaluated, but as equals who had done what none of them had managed in 20,000 years, earned the respect of the Vashkari. A new era of galactic relations was beginning, and humanity, barely a century into its journey among the stars, found itself at the center of it all. Not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they had shown that there was more than one kind of strength. And in doing so, they had changed the rules of a game that had been played the same way for 20 millennia. The most hostile species across 3 galaxies would never attack human ships again. Not out of fear, but out of respect. And perhaps, though they would never admit it, even a touch of admiration.